So now we begin to discuss the land of Israel. Now that is a very important discussion for many reasons, but especially for the topic of our course, because all roads are leading to Mashiach in our course. That is because all of the messianic drama is going to happen in Eretz Yisrael, right? It's all going to happen in Eretz Yisrael. There's a number of reasons why it's going to be that way. A lot of it's going to do with prophecy, because prophecy can only exist in Eretz Yisrael. Proof that he is the Mashiach can only happen in Israel, as we'll see. So before we figure out Mashiach, you have to understand the relevance and the importance of the land of Israel. And in order to get that, we're going to have to figure out, which we will after this topic, exile. Because one of Mashiach's main jobs is to end all of our exiles. Whether we're in the fourth exile, which is mainstream thought, or as I'll show you, the fifth exile, which is non-mainstream thought, but is mentioned among Chazal. One of Mashiach's jobs, actually the proof that he is Mashiach, and his job as Mashiach, is to end Galut. Everyone says that. Actually, according to the Rambam, when we get to Mashiach, we'll see, the Rambam is of the opinion that that's his main job. The main difference between Olam Hazeh and Yemot HaMashiach is Shibud Malchut, that we're no longer going to be tortured, no anti-Semitism, we're all going to live in Eretz Yisrael. That's the main difference. Now the Kabbalists are going to disagree, and they're going to say, no, everything's going to change. But the Rambam says, no, the main difference is we're going to be left alone, live in Eretz Yisrael, with the Beit HaMikdash, with Mashiach, bringing Korbanot, and no one's going to hurt us, and we're going to be left alone. No more bombs coming from Gaza or Hezbollah, no more stabbings of Jewish people and killings. Actually, all war, actually the prophets tell us, is going to disappear. Not just against Target, we're going to have world peace, finally. That's the main difference. But there's no doubt about it, it's all going to start in Eretz Yisrael. So let's spend a couple of classes talking about why Israel, what it's there for, the purpose of it, because before Mashiach comes, the majority of the Jewish people are going to return to the land of Israel. And the Mashiach is going to finish that off. Kibbutz Galiot is going to finish that off. So let's start at the very beginning. I mean, you would have thought the beginning discussion of Eretz Yisrael would occur, I don't know, with Moshe Rabbeinu who wanted to get in, right? Or the building of the temple. And yet we're going to go right back, first of all, to Avram Avinu. Because the land of Israel was promised to each and every one of the Avot. Why each one of them had to be promised, we'll see in a second. And it says in Bereshit, Hashem says to Avram Avinu, this is according to many opinions the first test of Abraham, Lech lecha, go, leave your home, Beit Avicha, Umolatcha, right? Mi'aretzecha, actually the other way around, Aretzecha, Umolatcha, Beit Avicha, leave your land, your hometown, your father's house, El ha'aretz shereka, to the land I will show you. And over there, you're going to become a great nation. And over there, I'm going to bless you and make your name great. And you become a bracha. So immediately, from this Avram Avinu, we see that before there's even a Jewish people, Avram is being led to Eretz Yisrael. At that point, it was Canaan, it wasn't Eretz Yisrael. But he's being led. That his mission is closely related to that land. By the way, what does he have to do before he goes to Israel? Anybody remember? What mitzvah does he have before he goes in? Not many mitzvah he was given, so it's pretty limited. What mitzvah did Avram Avinu have before he went to Eretz Yisrael? Brit Milah. That's correct. The circumcision. We know that Brit Milah and Eretz Yisrael are deeply related and connected. And remember, for the Jewish people, at the time of Yehoshua, were allowed into Eretz Yisrael, they had to be circumcised as well, right? They had to be circumcised as well. Many of them didn't during the time in the Midbar because it was dangerous, right? They're living in a desert, right? Before they went in, they needed to do it. They needed a Brit Milah. Okay, so that's Avram Avinu. Lech lecha, go. This is where you're going. Yitzchak too is promised. Right? V'yireh elav Hashem. Hashem appears to Yitzchak and says, live in this land, I'm going to give it to you. V'yomer alter Mitzrayim, shachem ba'aretz. Remember, after the Akedah, Yitzchak was not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. He became a korban to Mimah for the rest of his life. So after the Akedah, Yitzchak was not permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael. He became a korban to Mimah, a perfect sacrifice. So he says, don't go, you need to stay here. Right? Go ba'aretz hazot, v'yeh imcha, and I'm going to be with you, Baruch, I'm going to bless you. Ki lecha l'zaracha eten, because I'm going to give it to you and your descendants. Eten, et kol ha'aretzot ha'el, this entire land, v'kimoti et shavua, and I'm going to fulfill the promise, the shavua, oath I made to Avram. Why did Yitzchak need to be promised as well? His father was promised. Why did Yitzchak get a promise as well? Avram, his father was promised. Why did you have to repeat it? It's been a whole paragraph in the Torah. Anybody? Why is Yitzchak also promised the land of Israel?
Because he had Ishmael too.
Because he had Ishmael too. That's right. So now we're getting very, very specific. Avram was promised to your children. Oh, Ishmael's a son. No. Not that son, Yitzchak. So Yitzchak is promised too. And we're going to have the same challenge in the next generation. So who's going to get it next? Yaakov as well is promised. Promised land of Israel. To exclude Esav. Right? Makes sense. So now Yishmael is excluded from the family for Eretz Yisrael. And Esav is excluded. And that's why Hashem appears to Yaakov, right? When he's in Padan Aram, gives him a bracha and says, you're no longer Yaakov, you're now Yisrael. It's going to be your name. And the land, he said, Hashem says, it's not going to your twin brother. He's out. He removed himself from the birthright. Yeah? They're going to get the land. Right, so now we're seeing a very deliberate genealogical transfer of the land. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to Moshe Rabbeinu on page 40 in the parasha, right? And he says to him, by the way, you're going to take the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. Why are we leaving Mitzrayim? Not just to get you out of slavery, but to give you the Torah, and then to take the Torah to the land of Israel. By the way, a question we'll have to discuss next class. Someone remind me, please. We have to discuss why, if Israel is so important, why the Torah was given outside of Israel. That is not a coincidence. That's a very deliberate plan. So I don't want to do that right now, but do remind me, please, next class. I want to look into that. Why the Torah was given outside of Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. Anyway, so Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to come down to rescue them from the land of Egypt and to bring them up. Notice that word. Mitzrayim, la'atzilum min ha'aretz hahu el eretz tova archava el eretz zevat chalav u'davash l'halito. It does say to go up to the land. Okay, next class we're going to focus on that one word, aliyah. Aliyah. We're going to see different interpretations about why the word aleh is used to describe going to Israel. It's not a new thing. It started with the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel in our generation. It goes back to time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? You're in Egypt, you go to Israel, you're going up. Okay, so just put that in your hippocampus. We'll pick up that one next class. So that was the promise to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? And then Yehoshua. Now, remember, Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed into Israel. He was not permitted because of the hitting of the rock. Yep, hitting the rock was the thing that prevented him from getting inside Eretz Yisrael. He prayed to Hashem how many times to get into Israel? Anybody remember? 515, very good. The gematria of Vet Hanan. Vet Hanan, he played, because Vet Hanan is he pleaded. So Rachel, that's the gematria of the amount of times he prayed. And what did Hashem say? That's more for our prayer class. He says, no more. One more time I'll have to let you go in. I can't let you in. That's it. I do have a question though. Hashem did promise Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Moshe Rabbeinu, that they would get to be in Israel. But they didn't get to really live in it and reside in it, right? Per se. This is, we're going to see when we get there, which is much later on, this is one of the proofs of resurrection of the dead. If Hashem promises something, He's got to fulfill it. He didn't fulfill it in their lifetime, so that proves that not reincarnation, but resurrection of the dead, Minat Torah, one of the proofs that it's Minat Torah, right, that it's hinted at in the Torah, is that they were promised the land of Israel. They would get to live there in peace with Zvat Chalav and Nevash, and they weren't. It means they'll come back, they will get it eventually when they resurrect at the end of days after Mashiach's arrival. So just bear that in mind when we get to resurrection of the dead. This is actually based upon these verses that they were actually promised the land of Israel. So Yehoshua also was promised, okay, when Hashem says Yehoshua, Moshe Rabbeinu is dead, you're taking over, cross the Jordan, you and the entire Jewish people, going to Eretz Yisrael, and every part, kol makom asher tidrach, every part you put kavrak lecha, your foot, bo lachem natati, you're going to get the land. Kasher debati al Mashiach, I promised Moshe Rabbeinu, right? You may say, well, Hashem promised Moshe. Moshe's dead, promise over. No. I'm promising you too. You're getting the land. Now, midbar valon, by the way, as a side point, the biblical Israel is different to the Israel we have now. Size of Israel right now is small, and they only conquered 7 nations. Avot was promised 10 nations. So there's 3 lands of 3 nations that were in Canaan that we did not get. There were 7 Canaanite nations, but Avraham was promised the land of 10 nations. So where are they? After Mashiach comes, the land of Israel is going to be much bigger. And we're going to get the land of those 3 other nations that weren't taken back then.
What land does that encompass?
Very, very good. Some say Syria, not deal, Syria, right? Up to Damascus, Jordan, Lebanon. It's gonna get much wider and bigger. Okay, some people say the entire world, but it's gonna push out to the sides for sure. Israel now is like this. It was probably truncated. Didn't include Elat, biblical Israel. It does now because Kedusha, but it was much wider. And that's actually one of the jobs of Mashiach, to tell us exactly the boundaries. And he's going to use a very unique and unusual form of prophecy that we're actually going to talk about in detail when we get there, to determine the size of the land of Israel. He's going to need that, so that's where the Beit HaMikdash goes and all the Aaron goes. He's going to need that stuff anyway, right? Because we're not too sure the exact location of the Beit HaMikdash, of all the Kalim, right? So he's going to tell us. I mean, Ezra did this. When we went back up in the Second Temple to build the Second Temple, Ezra had Nevuah, was able to tell us exactly where to put stuff. We've lost that now, and one of Mashiach's jobs is to do that. He's going to use a very unusual form of prophecy. Actually, this form of prophecy isn't just weird and unusual, it's also one of the ways that he proves he is the Mashiach. And there were false messiahs in history, the Gemara tells us, who were rejected because they did not have this form of prophecy.
Do they know what the prophecy
Yes.
is?
We're going to talk about it. How long do we have? How long is class going to finish? Keep forgetting.
It's at 1:20.
Okay, the next piece will take us more than 5. Let's leave the next piece for next class. We'll look at a very famous, probably one of the most famous Rashis. Next class about Israel, and we'll pick up our Israel discussion then. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Well done. You did it.